Our guest today, an amazing story. Attended college at age 12, graduated law school at 18, and then did what most law graduates do, moved to California to play poker. Now, over the years, he's had his ups and downs in poker and in business, life as well. And he's detailed it all in a new book called Fult Tilt. Just finished it, and it's a fascinating read. Dutch Boyd, our guest today. Guy's got 2 bracelets, 06 and 2010. Thanks for joining us today, man. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's good to be on. Thanks for having me on.
You've certainly made the most of your TV time, Dutch. Was that part of the plan when you were a young guy coming up, or did you just do it on the spot and only to realize later that, hey, you did the right thing?
Was it part of the plan to use TV time? I don't know. I mean, everyone's been talking about sponsorships and the importance of television for years. I think Mike Sexton was the first person to really go public with this idea that poker was going to be dying unless we could get outside money in, and the best way to do that was to just promote the sport and get as much exposure as possible. So I don't know. I guess I've never turned away from the cameras. I think I wouldn't say that I go seek them out though.
Can you take us back and relive for us that Moneymaker hand when he calls with the pair of threes, where you were in the tournament, and how close you really came to winning the big one, man?
Yeah, it was pretty close, Derek. It's funny because even 10 years later, I'll just be chilling out at a bar somewhere, and someone will come up to me and say, "Hey, you're Dutch, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, how you doing?" And he's like, "Do you remember that one hand where you were against Moneymaker and he busted you out?" And yeah, I remember it. It was actually Farah who actually KO'd me, but it was Moneymaker who really took the bulk of the chips. So it was day 4 of the main event in 2003, and I had the chip lead. Moneymaker was to my left, and I guess I probably had about maybe $1 million in chips, and he had maybe 800,000 in chips. So he had quite a few chips. He was looking pretty good, and I had been raising a lot. He flatted on the button, and he had pocket threes. The flop came out 9-4-2. I had nothing. Just completely whiffed it. But decided I'd go with it anyway. I check raised him, and he made a really big call. I gotta hand it to him. It was for his whole tournament life, and it was kind of rough too. It was one of those situations where even if I'm bluffing, I could be beating his pair of threes. But he was right. He made the right call, and in the end, it went runner for a straight. So the flop was 9-4-2. I think the turn was an ace, and the river was a 5. So it actually would have turned out, even if I had like a set of 9s, he still walks away winning that pot. It's funny because sometimes you can make the right read, but you don't necessarily know what they're going to do. So it's one thing to know, okay, this guy's weak. It's another thing to know that if I check raise, he's going to fold. He didn't. He made the right move. I really can't fault him. I don't know that I would have made the same call. And I guess I could probably make an argument that it was the wrong call, but it is what it is. When all was said and done, he ends up with a pretty big chip lead at that point, and I end up barely keeping my head above water. Sammy Farah ended up knocking me out about 8 hands later. It was frustrating, we were pretty close, 12 people left, and at the time that was the biggest tournament that had ever been. 840 players. It seemed massive, and it's interesting. I think about Chris because I think that Chris kind of demonstrates there's kind of 2 types of professional poker players. Derek, there's guys that kind of fall into it after having a lot of success early on, and then there's guys that if you take away their first bracelet, for example, they're still going to be there. If you imagine like Phil Ivey or Lane Flack or Daniel Negreanu, and you take away that first big win that they had, I don't really think that it would change much. I think that it'd still be coming this year to the World Series. I think they'd still have multiple bracelets. Moneymaker is a different beast. Because I think if you take away that 2003 win, he's not around. Same with Jamie Gold, maybe Hatcham.
He's the guy that changed poker, and yet some people say, well, whoever won that year would have changed poker.
I don't think that it would have had as much of an effect if I had won, or Ivy had won, or Farah had won, or anybody else had won. I think if David Singer wins that tournament, I don't think that 2004 sees the triple numbers. Moneymaker was just the perfect name, the perfect backstory to really capture the public's attention. So yeah, I think poker's better off for it.
One of the things you talk about in Fult Tilt is that perhaps poker's glory days are past us. I mean, we hit with Jamie Gold, what was that? Close to, 9,000 people? I mean, it was crazy, right? Are we past poker's glory days?
I would love to say no, but I think that I think that we are, Derek. I don't think that we're ever going to get back to that point where we have $12 million going for first place in the World Series Poker main event. I don't think that we're going to have quite as many people as we had in 2006. Everything comes to an end and everything declines, and I think that we might have seen the height. That might have been it. Certainly it's been trending downward every year. And I think that a lot of things would have to change in the industry for us to start seeing poker on an upward trend again. I just don't see it happening. Yeah, I think the best days are behind us. And that's not to say that this upcoming series isn't going to be great, because I think it is. I think it's going to be absolutely off the hook, and it's going to dwarf anything that was around when I first started back in 2002, 2003, 2004. But I don't think we'll ever get back to those that height that we saw with that high water mark that we saw in the gold year in 2006.
One of the things you mention in the book is that you advise people, if they're thinking of turning pro, that, hey, you got to have a job as well. I mean, poker is a tough racket. Even if you're good like you, I mean, it might take a while before you make a big score, right? I mean, it's a tough gig.
Well, especially if you're going to try to do tournaments, Derek. Playing cash games is definitely the way to go if you want to make a living playing professional poker, because tournaments, the variance will kill you, and it's just a really tough career when you go into work and you lose money every single day. That's what happens with tournaments. I mean, at least with cash games, you should be winning more than you're losing. But with tournaments, that's just not the case. You win maybe 1 out of 50 or 1 out of 100 tournaments you play. So you suit up, you go in, and you get knocked out, and that's what life is like as a tournament player. It really wears on you. I talk a little bit about in the book about this idea from Daniel Kahneman about loss aversion, and how it hurts more to lose something than it feels good to win it. And so if you think about poker in that way, you can see how we're really kind of doomed as professional poker players. If it hurts twice as much to lose $1 as it feels good to win it, your win rate has to be pretty sick to balance out all the negativity that you feel. And no one's is, just a hint. You're never going to have somebody who has more positive emotions than they do negative emotions. It's just the nature of the human psyche. And so I think that's why you see a lot of people just walking around miserable. Even the winners are just miserable.
You talk about smoking weed throughout. I mean, that's obviously a big part of your life, a big part of a lot of people's lives. It's their right to do so, they believe. You tell the great story about Antonio Esfandiari and Phil Locke and smoking with them, and how one guy's sort of the baller. He's, the bigger-than-life character, Esfandiari. And then there's the nit, Phil Locke, but they're both interesting. The perfect team, right?
I thought so. I still do. I think they're a great team. About weed, weed's just pretty much part of poker. If you ever are on the tournament trail and you just stop in like a Tunica hotel room during the World Series of Poker circuit, or a Reno hotel during they used to have the WPT up there. You just walk down the halls; it's everywhere. It smells like weed. It's part of the culture, and if you go to the World Series, even now, even with them coming down on drug use during the World Series, even now, if you walk outside during every break, there's going to be quakes of players passing around a one-hitter. They've kind of gotten a little bit more coy with it now, Derek. They've got these e-cigarette, these little egos that are and they're vaping. It's called dabbing, I guess is what it's called, dabbing, where they put a little bit of weed wax in there. So now it looks like an e-cigarette, but I mean it's still weed. So it's part of the culture. I talk about it. I don't really smoke anymore. I haven't smoked weed in a few years, but for a long time it was pretty much every day. And I'd be one of those kids running out to the parking lot during breaks and smoking it up. And it's not really talked about a lot, but it's pretty pervasive in the poker culture. I'm pretty surprised at just how many players do smoke regularly. And then it's just like it's nothing. You don't really see other drugs as much as you see weed, but cocaine's in there. It's a pretty big part of the culture.
The crew, I mean, it was a big part of poker. You guys were going to take over the poker world. You outline in the book the ups and downs, the personal relationships, some of the resentments that carried out, and the crew really became more popular than the success that you guys were actually having. Is that a fair statement?
I would say so. I think that the crew did pretty good for ourselves. We've got a WPT championship. Scotty got a WPT, 2 bracelets for him, 1 for Brett. It's not like we were we were paying dues. There were no like meetings, or like it wasn't like a secret password. So to like say the crew disbanded, I don't know. I mean, we had all kind of gone our separate ways, I suppose, before that Rolling Stone article hit. And so it's kind of interesting when you look at the public perception and the actuality, the reality of what's going on. The crew is just kind of an example of that in poker. When it comes down to it, the public perception of what's going on in poker and the actual reality of poker is just so far apart.
My perception is this, that a lot of these guys are going around the world, they're winning $1 million poker tournaments, and they're living a baller lifestyle. Is that true?
Sometimes it's true. But I think that, just as often, people that you think are going around and just living the high life are struggling quite a bit. You see players who have hundreds of thousands of dollars in makeup, and then they'll win $250,000, and they don't see a dime of it because it's just all going to their backers. You see people who are deep in debt, and when you see somebody win a big score, you don't see all the losses that it took to get them there. That's one of the big problems with pretty much every ranking system we've ever had in poker is that it doesn't count losses at all. And I talk about that in the book too. I talk about Lane Flack, who was ranked number 2 one year in the Card Player Play of the Year. He didn't know it, and he had an interview where someone asked him, are you looking to get number 1? I noticed you're number 2, and he was surprised. He was like, I'm number 2 this year? Shoot, I would hate to see number 3. And I'd hate to be the guy who's in number 3. And it's so true. You can win. You can win $2 million on paper, but that's all it is. And people will think that you've lost millions, but in actuality, you never really. It's not like you ever had it in a suitcase in front of you. So yeah. There are certainly some people out there, Derek, though, that are doing well enough, and they're flying around the world and playing big tournaments and high rollers and whatnot. But those are so few and far between. And there's plenty of people who you think that's the case that it really isn't.
Dutch Boyd is our guest. The book is called Fult Tilt. I just finished it, and believe me, if you love poker like I do, you're going to love this book. Let's talk about bipolar disorder and some of your manic states, because we just talked about the impression you might get. And my impression of you is, hey, this super smart whiz kid, he's doing well in 03, 04, wins his bracelet in 06. This guy's just got it all. And yet, I don't know the full story. And when I was reading the book, I was like, wow, I mean, this guy went through some tough times.
Yeah, I mean, everyone goes through tough times. But I feel like I've had more than my fair share. Honestly. Bipolar disorder is something I've struggled with for, pretty much a decade. I feel like I've had it under control over the last 5 years or so. I really haven't had a relapse since 2008, and a lot of it for me, I think, was just getting off the drugs and maybe settling down, growing up a little bit, and taking care of myself a little bit better. But while you're not, you're prone to those kind of psychotic breaks. It can be pretty scary and pretty rough, especially for the people who are around you. While you're going through some of the stuff, sometimes it can be pretty pleasurable, but it gets you into some pretty bad spots for sure.
In the book, you talk about your brother and the close relationship you guys had and your lifestyle growing up, single mother, and then she meets a guy and you borrow some money off him for this new venture you've got. You're both smart guys. He's part of the hacker community, so he knows his computer stuff. So you guys decide to start Poker Spot, and things seem to be going pretty well for you there for a while. I mean, you were on the move, but then some things happen and you learned some tough lessons in business, didn't you?
Yeah. We were one of the very first ones to that party. We invented online poker tournaments, and we were the very first ones to come up with the split pot games, and we had beautiful software. Everything seemed to be going pretty well. And looking back, I don't know if it would have been better if it had succeeded. I don't know if I would be better off if I was in Howard Letter's spot right now. When it finally dissolved, I talk about kind of the evolution to the failure of Poker Spot in the book quite a bit. When it finally went down, it was really frustrating, really sad. But I don't know. My life would be completely different if it hadn't. I feel like I'm pretty comfortable with where I am right now.
I mean, you took a lot of criticism on the poker forums from people that really didn't know the story. Even some big name players, guy you mentioned in the book, Greg Raymer, maybe didn't know the full story, and yet they're talking about you in the online forums. I got the sense that you kind of had a guilty conscience and that you wanted to make sure everyone got their money back, including your stepfather. And then at some point you just realized, after doing the best you could to pay these people back, you just realized, well, I lost too. And someone gave you a piece of advice about that. Was it your girlfriend? Said, you lost too. You got to let this thing go.
Yeah, I think that the exact word she said that really hit was, you can't expect other people to let it go if you don't let it go. You can't expect other people to forgive you if you don't forgive yourself. And yeah, I lost quite a bit when Poker Spot went down, and I've been on both sides of it. Derek, I lost quite a bit when Fult Tilt went down, and I was one of the players who had qualified for the Epic Poker $1 Million free roll. There's $40,000 in equity when that went down. I've been on both sides, where I've been on the operations side, I've been on the losing side as a player, and it feels bad both ways, but just kind of have to get over it. If I saw Chris Ferguson or Howard Lederer walking down the street, I wouldn't go up to them and start criticizing them and telling them how they owe me money, any more than I would if I saw Pollock or Andy Duke. I think the Fult Tilt pros who were running Fult Tilt into the ground, I think they started with the best intentions. I think Andy Duke and Pollock started the Epic Poker League with the best intentions, and circumstances just happened where Fult Tilt goes down and they owe hundreds of millions of dollars out, and they paid most of their players. A lot of people still got screwed though. You don't hear too much about it, but like the affiliates, for example, that's where I had most of my money. And now what happens is Poker Stars gets all those players, and they don't have to worry about these revenue share for life deals that Fult Tilt had agreed to. So a lot of people still ended up getting screwed, even though a lot of the players got paid back. Most of the players, I think, got paid back. I didn't get paid back because I had an affiliate deal. So they kind of lumped me in with the non-pay group.
Wow.
Which kind of sucked. But it comes down to it, I say this in the book, I'm hoping that Chris Ferguson and Howard Lederer come back to the World Series. And if they do, if they're at my table, I'm going to just play with them. I'm not going to say anything, because I know that they lost a lot. They were sitting there looking to be billionaires. And because of mismanagement, because of, not everything that brought them down was really in their control either. I'll also tell you this, Derek, my own public image and all the backlash from Poker Spot really started disappearing when Black Friday happened. His Poker Spot was such a small drop of the bucket compared to these bigger scandals.
Yeah, no kidding.
Even though I did lose a lot for Black Friday, I feel like I did gain a little bit too, because it kind of took away quite a bit of the attention. When you got like 1,000 players affected with Poker Spot, and you got 1 million players affected with Fult Tilt. You got like hole carding going on in Ultimate Bet, and Russ Hamilton sitting there, cheating people for tens of thousands. I was on that side too, Derek. I lost 30,000 in those absolute games.
Wow.
That wasn't Ultimate, right? That was before they had merged. It was 100, 200 limit, and then 6 months later it comes out that they were hole carding that very game.
Well, you make an inference in the book about designing a program where robots could play poker, where you could design the robot to play better than anybody, and that's how you'd win the money. I mean, are we far off from that?
It's already happening. I've seen it. I can confirm to you that 2 or 3 years ago with the series, someone was actually showing me a program on their phone that they had built. They were beating the 25-cent, 50-cent no limit games on Poker Stars when they showed it to me, and they were showing it. They were like, "Here it is. This is." They were showing me like their screen at home in LA. He's like, "Take a look. He was like, I want you to help me get the algorithm a little bit better." And I was like, "Yeah, I don't really feel comfortable doing that." But I can tell you, Derek, it's already happening. We are already at the point where if you sit down in a low limit game, there's a pretty good chance that 1 or 2 of those spots that you're playing against are computer players, are artificial players. And there's definitely a cat and mouse game where you've got Poker Stars has done quite a bit to try to curb that, try to catch that type of behavior. You think about what Poker Stars has put in tens and tens of millions of dollars, maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars into their software development since they launched back in 2001. It was 2001, September 11th, 2001. That's when they launched. So when they launched their software, they came out with tournaments, I think, in February of that next year in 2002. And since then, the software hasn't really changed from a graphical user interface perspective, but it looks basically the same as it did 10 years ago. And so, they've put in tens of millions of dollars into development, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars in development. So as a player, you might be asking, well, where did it go? The answer is it went to this kind of thing. It went to this kind of back end that they probably didn't plan for when they were releasing it. The kind of things that catch these artificial intelligence players, being able to track mouse movements. That's one thing I know that they were doing is, they were able to stop a lot of these bot players because they would, if a player wasn't actually moving his mouse or moved it in a way that didn't look like a human player, then they would be able to catch it. They also do some, stuff that might violate some privacy. Zero doubt that there's a lot of bots going on. It's a cat and mouse game, and it's one that the operators just can't win because there's motivated hackers out there who they see millions of dollars if they can just beat the games.
For the average person, part of the masses that's watching American Idol at night and The Voice on Mondays and that sort of thing, have no idea about the hacking world. You've got a great insight there through your brother. Can you just describe for them what it's like? I mean, to me, it sounds like it's just this world of espionage on the computer and trying to figure out things, and yet these kids aren't they? They're figuring things out.
I don't know how much insight I can really give to you, Derek. I would definitely encourage you to check out DEF CON one year. It's pretty interesting. I talk about that in my book, too, about how it's right there at the Rio. Right after the World Series of Poker, all the poker players leave. They clean up the tables, and they empty out the Amazon and Pavilion and Brasilia rooms. And then, 2 weeks later, here come the hackers, and it's DEF CON. Pretty interesting. And I would say that the hacker community... it's kind of like the poker community when you look at how much of a power curve it is. You got a couple of very small percentage of them have done really well for themselves, and the rest of them are just really struggling. And the demographics actually look kind of similar with online poker players and the hacking culture, where you got primarily males in their early 20s, late teens, early 20s, and pretty smart and not really getting paid what you'd expect someone in their position to be getting paid. It's kind of like they would rather hustle $1 than earn 10. If that makes sense. It's the same kind of it's the same kind of thing. Along with that is this whole idea of freedom, personal autonomy. I like both of the cultures, and they both have a lot in common.
Dutch, where can people get this book? I know it's coming out soon.
Yeah, they should be able to get it on Amazon on the 19th. And they should be able to get it in digital versions, maybe even before that. I think that should be on the Kindle store this weekend. They can go to DutchBoard.com or PokerTilt.com, get it in EPUB or Mobi or PDF. And Derek, thanks for reading it. I'm really glad that you liked it. Thanks for having me on the show, and I hope to come on again.